let's carry on with this idea. Take an example of a road at different times or different definition of what we mean by the road. A toll road. And if you drive to New York City, you've got to cross bridges, you've got to pay money. I think there's now the bridge to go to Laval. I think it's the Highway 25. There's also the Highway 30 south of Montreal. This is a toll road. You have to pay for using it. So a toll road at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we would say it's excludable because it's a toll road. They have a barrier to prevent you from getting on the road. It's rivalrous because at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, other people want to use the road same time as you. A similar term for rivalrousness is congestion. So you're taking up space, which prevents somebody. The marginal cost is greater than zero. A toll road at 3 o'clock in the morning, well, it's still excludable because they can prevent you from driving on the road. There's a barrier, but there's no rivalry. There's nobody else driving on the road. You can go as quickly as you want. And so we would say this is a club good. Not excludable, well, Décarie, it's a open road to anybody. There's no barrier to enter it, so it's available to the public. It's not excludable. At 3 o'clock in the morning, there's no congestion, so it's not rivalrous. We would call that a pure public good. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a typical working day, Thursday, Friday, something like that, well, it's not excludable because it's open to the public and it's rivalrous. You take up space. And this is, as you will see, typically the major problems. And in fact, the problem with Buffalo is that they're a common resource. Something is rivalrous, but it's not excludable. Externalities typically come in two sorts, negative and positive. I'll take a look, first of all, at that negative externality. Negative externalities, when somebody goes about doing something, typically a transaction of some sort, and in the process of doing that, imposes a cost on a third party. That's why it's referred to as an externality. It can also arise in the case of a common resource, known as congestion costs, because in effect, we're doing something and you cause some cost to another person. Things like, for example, you drive your car. You go about, there's a cost that you face. You have to buy gasoline, insurance, maintenance of your car, but then you get the benefit of going from point A to point B. In the process of doing that, and you make a decision of how much you're going to drive, you'd also take up space on the road, which imposes a cost on other people. You also pollute the air. These are costs that you don't take into account and are referred to as a negative externality. Typical example would be, for example, your neighbor plays noisy music. You find it irritating. Your neighbor goes about the decision of how much music to listen to and at how loud based on the neighbor's choice of benefits and cost. But the neighbor doesn't take into account the cost that's imposed on the people around, such as yourself, because and for you that's a negative externality, a cost. A positive externality is the same concept, but in this case the benefit is it provides a benefit to a third party. That means to say you do something, and in the process of doing it, you make a decision of how much to do, and in the process you create a benefit for another person. It's sometimes known as the effect of a free rider. So Walt Disney put on a fireworks display. He decides how much fireworks, how much to spend on the fireworks in terms of the cost benefit, but that maximizes his own benefit, but it doesn't take into account the benefit of other people that may enjoy watching what they're seeing. Examples of this would be a drive-in movie. You can sit on the side and watch it, but once again, it's going to be underproduced because it doesn't take into account this positive externality. This would be the case if you're listening to your neighbor playing music and you happen to like the music. So in that case, it's underprovided. Another example would be vaccination. If you get a vaccination, you make a decision about whether to get vaccinated or not based on your own personal situation. But what's not taken into account is if you're in a society where other people are vaccinated, well, that provides a benefit for everybody because there's less likelihood of spreading some kind of a disease. I want to finish with this last concept of a positive externality, or pecuniary externality, Pecuniary externality is an externality that occurs when, for example, you do something and it creates a benefit for a third party, but the benefit shows up in terms of a cost or in terms of money. Simple example to illustrate the concept. You're buying coffee from a local coffee shop. You like the coffee. You pay $3 for a cup of coffee. They're happy. You're happy. It's a good deal. A new coffee shop opens up just beside. and they only charge $2, same quality of coffee. As a result, now you go and choose to purchase your coffee at the cheaper place, $2, which creates, in effect, a negative externality for the first seller because they've lost your business. But this is known as a pecuniary externality. The first store, the first coffee shop cannot sue the second shop for damages because, in effect, the benefit, the loss for the first shop, they used to sell coffee at $3, now they're only selling at $2, is a benefit to you. So this is known as a pecuniary externality and it's not liable. Uh, Pricing and market failure, or at least in terms of this concept of different types of goods. Generally speaking, if something is a pure private good, that means it's both excludable and rivalrous, the market generally works. That means to say the price is set at market to the extent that there's perfect competition, there isn't some kind of collusion going on or something of this sort. And in fact, if you look at it, generally speaking, the world does not lack for things that are pure private goods, such as ice cream cones, bicycles and automobile, a whole variety of things that are considered as excludable and rivalrous. In the case of a club good, the problem here is that because it's not excludable, it's not rivalrous, it's excludable but not rivalrous. Providing the good or service to another person is almost marginal cost is close to zero. Like the example of the bridge. In this case, then, efficiency would dictate that the price should be zero, like a bridge. It shouldn't cost anything to cross the bridge. The difficulty there is, well, then how to pay for the bridge. So in this sense, efficiency would say that there should be price discrimination, that some people should pay a higher price, some people a lower price, to the point where the price should even fall as low as zero. This was the example I gave with Air Canada for selling a ticket as long as it's greater than the marginal cost. So it's a question of price. And frequently for club goods, what we observe is that there's a lot of price discrimination that occurs. The club goods are often known as a natural monopoly for this reason. But generally speaking, because the club goods are excludable, again, the market mechanism seems to work fairly well. Where one of the problems are pure public goods. Here the difficulty is because they're not excludable, it's very difficult to receive any kind of revenue. But then at the same time, they're not rivalrous, so the price should be zero. It's a problem of free riders and the non-excludability. So often it's said that these goods should be provided by the state. But it's not so simple. They're probably underprovided, even though they may be state subsidized. But a famous example are lighthouses. A lighthouse is for entry to a port. A lighthouse is a pure public good in the sense that it's not excludable. You can't prevent boats from benefiting from the lighthouse, assuming that the lighthouse near a rocky cliff that ships would sink at. But it's also not rivalrous because the light can be provided for many people. So then there's some reason to suspect that the state should provide for the building of lighthouses. In actual fact, though, historically that's not been the case. There's ways in which when a boat enters port, it has to pay a special fee, and that money goes towards the building of the lighthouse. So lighthouses have been private in the past. Another example of something like this would be broadcast television. Without this is not like Netflix, without any pay. So that means like something called over the air. So with a simple antenna, you can watch. It's not rivalrous. Anybody can watch, and many people can watch the same broadcast signal at the same time, and it's also not excludable. It'd be difficult to prevent somebody from receiving the signal. Another example would be the radio people listen to in their car. So this is a pure public good. How is it paid for? It's done through something called bundling. In effect, what happens is they sell advertising, so you watch the television program, but simultaneously you also receive advertising or messages and so on. And this is another example where a pure public good can be provided by the private sector and not necessarily by the state. The final case, a common resource. This is the major problem, and this leads to a whole series of environmental issues. Sometimes it's known as the tragedy of the commons. In effect, the tragedy of the commons is precisely this issue of pricing of a common resource. Another problem that arises is something called the gold rush effect, where people rush to try and obtain something before everybody else takes it. So there's an overconsumption of the good or over declaration of ownership of the good inefficiently. So many of the various schemes or ideas to solve the environmental problems amount to, in effect, taking a common resource, keep in mind it's rivalrous, but not excludable, and making it excludable somehow. And so, in effect, it means to move the good from the position of a common resource up to become a private good, and then to sell it as would normally through a market scheme of some sort.